We are live.
Welcome, everyone, to Connected Learning TV. I'm super delighted to be kicking off the first webinar in our November 2015 series titled Supporting Connected Learning Experiences in Minecraft, which was organized by Connected Camps. So if you're watching this webinar live right now, please take a moment to share it with your networks. So I'm Mimi Ito, and I'm your host today. I'm a cultural anthropologist and a learning scientist who studies what young people do on the internet and with games and how it relates to education. And I'm happy to be facilitating this conversation today. So today we are going to be talking with Victor Lazo, Zach Hart, and Mike Langlois. I just asked Mike how to pronounce his last name, Langlois. And we are going to be talking about the care and feeding of Minecraft servers and communities. How can we host thriving learning communities that foster peer mentorship, digital citizenship, and collaborative creation online? Before we dive into our chat, I want to go over just a couple of quick details. So if you're watching live right now, we welcome your comments and questions through either the Twitter hashtag Connected Learning, one long word, or CCAMPS, C-C-A-M-P-S. You can also use the Q&A feature that you should see within the video player. So we'll do our very best to try to keep track of the questions and answer them live in the Google Hangout if you post through any of those channels. The webinar is also being co-streamed at the National Writing Project's educatorinnovator.org. So to start off, I'd like to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. So Mike, maybe you could start us off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Langlois, and greetings from Cambridge, Mass. I am a psychotherapist and educator. I do psychotherapy, and in addition, I teach at Harvard Medical School, UB, University of Buffalo, and Boston College. And why I'm here is because my interest is the interface between psychology, education, and video games. It's what I've been spending most of my time in research and teaching over the past several years. And in particular, right now, I'm interested in Minecraft and how it allows people to access learning across all sorts of differences, whether it be race, socioeconomic status, or learning differences.
Victor, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Victor Lazo, and I'm the Connected Camps system administrator. So what I do is help set up Minecraft servers and maintain them. I've also helped set up servers for the Los Angeles Public Library through the LA Makerspace, as well as helped run a pilot project a couple of years ago with the Connected Learning Alliance. So I'm happy to be here to share my experiences with running different communities.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Zachary Hart. I am a student at University of California, Irvine, and I am one of the lead counselors at Connected Camps. So I moderate situations on the server. I also provide technical support and I help teach programming at in-person workshops.
Great. It looks like I'm back just in time. Thank you, Firefox, for that little bit of excitement. Yeah, so it's really great. I'm so happy to be part of this conversation today because I am, in addition to being a researcher and an educator, I'm also co-founder of Connected Camps, which is a new benefit corporation that's working to deliver online Minecraft learning experiences for young people. So Zach and Victor are part of my team, and I've learned so much from them about what it takes to host and foster a thriving Minecraft community online. And Mike has been a longtime fellow traveler in the Minecraft and education world and has some really interesting expertise to share with us today about psychology and socio-emotional development for kids. And I think it's a really exciting and unusual opportunity for us to be able to have a conversation about the different kinds of Minecraft experiences and environments that we've been working to foster for kids. So I thought to start off, it might be good just to give our listeners a little bit of a sense of what these two projects, Mike, your project, and then the Connected Camps projects have really, what have you been doing in terms of, fostering Minecraft experiences, building, I know in the case of Connected Camps, online camp, and a kid club for kids on a server. I don't know, maybe, Zach, do you want to start us out by just describing what, summer camp was like and what our kid club is like at Connected Camps?
Sure. Summer was a blast, actually. That was like hands down one of the best summers I ever had. But what we did over the summer was we ran the server all day and hosted events at specific times during the day, like traditional, like building competitions and survival challenges, just giving the kids opportunities to work together in situations that involve survival and stuff. And now that school has started, we do the same thing, but we mainly just host events, and we just mainly have the server open to host events and stuff after school. So that's what we're doing right now. And I have a blast working with the kids. They're all really good and really smart.
And Mike, do you want to describe some of the programs or engagements you've been designing in Minecraft?
Sure. So I've actually been moving out of the stage of lurking, where I spent a lot of time trying different Minecraft servers all over the internet and kind of getting a sense of how cultures were working, and they're all very different in some ways. I had been participating in a less lurky way with one in Australia for a year and a half, and now I'm kind of excited to be moving into a new stage where I'm actually going to be launching a server which is designed to do Minecraft with a focus on social emotional learning. And the goal is to have kids and educators and counselors get together so that the kids and the educators and counselors can learn, but not without having fun, like just very loosely moderated fun.
Thanks, Mike and Zach. Yeah, one of the things that's been really great and fun about our Minecraft experience is really, bringing together a community of counselors like Zach, our college counselors and our high school counselors, and designing that social environment, which I think, Mike, you've been spending so much time both researching and thinking about how to foster. And what's an interesting challenge, though, is that it's not just the social environment like you have in any kind of face-to-face community or camp, but it's also the technical infrastructure that has to be really thoughtfully designed. And that was where I thought, Victor, maybe you could give us a few tips and pointers about some of the things that you want to look at when you're doing the social technical engineering and configuring and modding the server to be, to foster the kind of interactions we want to see with kids.
Yeah, obviously, I think you want to, figure out what your community is going to be about. So pretty much before you even think about the technical stuff, you want to think about, what are the rules of the server, what's doable, and what's allowed. You don't want people going all over the place and blowing up stuff or breaking things down. So having a good rule set at first is probably pretty important before even thinking about the technology. But once that's all set, you want to think about the different things you want to be able to accomplish on the server. If there's no griefing, you would want some plugins or different add-ons that you could add to your server that can either log what's going on, who's breaking or placing blocks, having things like WorldGuard, which helps with claiming different plots of land, as well as other plugins like Bucket Grief Prevention, which helps with sorting out who owns what on the server. So those kind of things you have to think about with planning different things on the server. Yeah, but obviously those are all tools. So I think the technology is there just to help, but it's mainly trying to foster the community through what your rule base is, as well as interacting with the players on the server itself. So that's just my little preview of, because I could go on forever about this technical stuff, but yeah, I would think about how you want to shape your community first, and then think about the technology afterwards.
Yeah, it was very interesting over the summer when our servers were open for so many hours and all the counselors were on Slack with Victor, and the kind of observing the sort of responsive, technology, social feedback loop for, deciding on, I don't know, things like permissions for building in certain areas and what happens when items drop. And there's so much configurability within the Minecraft server space that it was really eye-opening to be. And Victor was such a trooper in responding to all of the things that came up, because you're always going to have something unexpected. So I don't know, Mike, in your observations in a lot of different server communities, what are some of the things that can go wrong? Why don't we start there?
Well, it's interesting because we have no idea how many different things can go wrong until we look at different places. One thing I wanted to mention before I get to that is that what Victor said I could very much relate to from the therapist point of view, or the social emotional learning point of view, that in some ways social emotional learning and the other technologies like the plugins have this in common, which is they're both essential, but if we're really doing our jobs, people aren't going to be thinking about those things. That those are both there to make the learning environment, and they're necessary, but if we're doing what we're doing well, they're not going to be noticing, oh, I'm experiencing social emotional learning, or oh, I'm using a plugin. It really depends. I've been part of servers where griefing was something that was allowed to happen because they didn't put permissions in against it. But if you were caught griefing, then moderators encouraged you to talk it out with the person you griefed and actually rebuild the thing that was damaged. So that's one way. Then there are other folks that you'll get banned after one griefing incident, and then there are others where you have a series of warnings, or you get put in a different zone. So there's a lot of different ways people handle it, and I think it kind of speaks to one of the cool things about Minecraft is that it's an intentional community, and so not every community has the same exact intentions. Like Connected Camps probably has a specific intention to bring them together that's very different than maybe another community where they're doing skyblock PvP, player versus player, and the goal is to cause a lot of damage and use TNT.
Yeah, that's so important to stress, the values of the specific community and the intentional nature of it, because like Victor said, it's really about setting up the norms and the expectations up front so that people are, fluid and immersed in that culture, rather than, having to be constantly moderating and correcting as we go. I think with Connected Camps, we have this unique challenge, which is, because we're educational server, there's learning goals attached to it. It's a little bit different from an organic Minecraft server where kids are joining, they're like, oh, we want to be in a build server, we want to be in a PvP server, and they're joining to be part of an existing sort of Minecraft culture. We're trying to nudge kids into behaviors that may not already be part of their existing experience and rule set or expectations for how to interact in a gaming environment. So I think that's both, like, it's sort of the challenge of educators, right? We want to meet kids where they are, but we also want to stretch them. And I'm sort of curious to hear from Zach, because you were really in the front lines, and I think we did our best to train our counselors and prepare our counselors for what they are going to expect in moderating a server with little kids. But Zach, I'm interested to hear from you about your experiences, about some of the challenges or some of the ways you had to adapt to what the kids ended up doing on the servers.
Well, there were, from most of the incidents that I've had with dealing with other people on the server, very rarely was the griefing intentional. But like when there's so many people on the server, especially on the very first few days of camp, there's just so much going on with all the children, and they they might accidentally like destroy something because they don't know it belongs to someone else, or they thought it was a naturally occurring structure. So we would have, um, for lack of a better word, miscommunication between the kids in terms of like, oh, did you do this on purpose? And then it's easy to tell if it's on accident though, because if it was deliberate, like the kids have ways of like showing that it was deliberate. Most of the time, they just leave signs and stuff like that, and we deal with those. Very rarely have we had to deal with those cases, but there are even some cases when that happens where the kids actually snap themselves out of it and they say like, hey, if that guy destroyed our stuff and we destroyed their stuff and being mean about it, we're not being any better compared to those other people. But the sheer number on the very first few days was kind of overwhelming because like it's such a new thing. The kids were super excited about summer, and it's very hard to keep track of everybody at the same time, especially since the world of Minecraft is actually physically bigger than the entire planet, the real life planet. It's really hard to like keep eyes in every part. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you guys did such a great job of sort of jumping in there and learning with the kids, and definitely they kept us on our toes. Victor, I don't know if are there any experiences you want to share from the summer on, how you had to meet some new challenges that were kind of unexpected in this open world of Minecraft?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had some things like built out, to try to, anticipate, the problems, the griefing. So, we did, like Brendan, our game designer, he helped make a space in our world called the cooldown space, where people were placed in there if they had some like griefing incidents, or if they broke like the code of conduct for the server. They would be placed there, and they would have time to sort of chat it out with the moderators. And what is this? So yeah, they couldn't like really chat with other folks, but they could still sort of participate in the game. And so, I mean, that was kind of like something new that we didn't do before, because the previous summer we ran a pilot camp and we didn't have anything like that. And a lot of the things that happened before were not even what is this sort of physical breaking in the world. It was kind of just misunderstanding, miscommunication, where kids would kind of see what they could sort of get away with, or calling other people names, or things kind of escalated. So I think it's pretty important to have like pretty good moderation on the server, to especially if your rules dictate that there's no like name calling or things like that in your community. So yeah, I mean, I've experienced a lot of different things. The previous camp before that, the first pilot project we did, we didn't have any plugins like to like sort of prevent griefing. So that was a really big learning experience, because what is this? We just had it open, and people just went crazy with TNT and just broke everything. So it's definitely always a learning experience, and I'm continuing learning, just trying to find out what's out there and what's best for the communities that we serve.
Yeah, I think we entered this summer, thanks to Victor, much more prepared with, plugins for the permissions and, you know, to lessen the damage when kids were being destructive, but also things like just chat filters and the cooldown space and all of that. And, you know, even with those protections, though, I think things happen and kids are super creative, which we love, but it means like they find workarounds. So even if there's a filter in the chat, they find ways of writing things on signs that might not be appropriate for our code of conduct. But I think the core, like Victor says, is the technology can only go so far, and we, you know, launch the camp with a clear code of conduct so that when things happen, you know, we also had an escalation policy to notify parents. And then, you know, I got feedback from parents saying, thank you for letting me know, because the parents don't necessarily know what their kids are doing in Minecraft. And when we got that email from you, we had a chat. And, you know, the kids were like, oh, well, this is real. This is a real community, and there are rules, and people mean business. And, you know, once you you really say that the code of conduct is a real thing, I think kids, they get that. And it was really interesting to see kids grow in that way. I'm going to take a minute just to take one of the questions that I see from Twitter from Culver Mackenzie, which is about coding in Minecraft. So my students are really into Minecraft. I have them coding through code.org, but how do I transition? And I think that's a great question. It's actually going to be the focus of our webinar on November 17th. That's hosted by Sarah Esper, who's been doing some really great work on coding through Minecraft, through ThoughtStem. And then at Connected Camps, too, we have coding workshops that we run through the computer craft mod, so kids can code in-game and see the impact of their coding right in the game, because they're controlling turtles. And there's lots of different ways, and depending on the level and interest of the kids, we've picked one that's very accessible for beginners. And I think Minecraft provides a real opportunity, because kids aren't just coding in a vacuum, but they're coding to produce things that are really meaningful in a shared world and community. And that's where you know, we've gotten some initial feedback and survey results from the kids who've gone through our coding programs, and they really, you can see that even with kids who didn't have a high interest in coding going in, that their interest in coding really increased. And so it's sort of back to this model of connected learning that is the theme of this webinar series, is that if you can really merge kids' skill development and learning with interests and the social support, the effects of that learning is so much bigger. And so I think it's coding is a really good example where it's usually not that interesting unless you're a kid who really has a strong disposition in that area to just code in a vacuum. But Minecraft is something that, you know, millions of kids have high interest in and have peer relations that are associated with it. So it's a really great entry point, and I hope, I really encourage you to experiment with that. So while we're on the positives, let's transition to some of the positive socio-emotional development that we're seeing with Minecraft. And Mike, I'd love to turn it over to you, because this is your area of expertise. I mean, what do you think the opportunities are here?
Well, you know, one of the things that I think is one of the most amazing opportunities is the ability to teach kids perspective taking. And to be able to, you know, there's a very important social emotional learning skill, which is the ability to develop empathy and to imagine the perspective of someone else. And what's amazing about Minecraft is the technology is built right in, that you can switch from the first person experience where you're just looking out at the world to the third person experience where you can see yourself. And then from that, if you're on a server, you see all these other third person characters, and you can start to make a very visual connection yourself, saying, oh, just like I've got the first person and third person, those third person people I see running around have first persons. That's sort of what we want kids to understand, which is that on the other side of the screen there is another human being that has thoughts and feelings and sort of their own goals. So that's one thing that just the technology does. And then it just creates this amazing shared set of symbols and characters. Like the creeper, for example, is this amazing character if you think about it, and you want to be able to talk about anger management. Like, how do you handle keeping your temper so that you don't blow up? How do you negotiate with someone else when you see they're starting to flicker? And then another one, my latest kick is Zombie Pigmen, helping kids understand the power on servers and communities of zombie pigmen, that the minute you're aggressive to one person, it affects the entire community. And how do you start to de-escalate if you've had a moment where you've had a conflict with someone, so that it doesn't become bigger and permanently contaminate, relationships.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Zach or Victor, have you seen any of these dynamics in the Connected Camps community?
I do see. First of all, that was an incredible analogy, by the way, Mike, of the creeper and the zombie pigman. I didn't even think about that until that's like genius. But as far as like managing temper and stuff, I do see kids like whenever kids get angry, especially like when someone is trying to build something, because it's important for kids to learn that other people have their own ideas and stuff. And what usually happens in build challenges is one kid wants to build, say, a water slide that goes in this direction, or another kid wants to build it and try to do some other thing, but they're both dead set on doing it. So what usually happens is one tries to destroy it, the other one say, no, we're doing this, and the other one says, no, we're doing this, and then the frustration will build up and up and up until like they realize like we need to agree on something that we can work together on. And if not, and if they don't come about it naturally, that's where I step in and try to help them, try to simmer down and stuff like that, and not blow up like a creeper.
So you have to model the not blowing up part, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, Mike, can you speak a little bit? I mean, you're a therapist. Can you speak to the role of adult mediation in some of this?
Sure can. And I think that one of the things that is really important from my perspective is, again, not just the intention of the community that's coming together on a Minecraft server, but the age, and maybe even more importantly, the developmental needs of whichever group is there. So that if you've got kids that are elementary school age, I think they need a lot more adult moderation, or even late adolescents who are sort of junior moderation with much more clear rules of conduct. I think as you get a little older and you get to middle school and then to adolescence, there needs to be more negotiation, just like we see in the world outside of Minecraft. So that in servers where there are a lot of really young kids, I think adults are often asked to step in. And that has got more of a place. But I think as kids get older, then the challenge for adults is really how to not jump in right away and let kids sort of negotiate these things themselves. And that, I think, is one thing that, when we talked earlier this year, I kind of heard that you were working on that was really kind of interesting and exciting to me, which was training kids that have gone through Connected Camps to sort of come back and do counseling, because I think that then creates this sort of legacy of people that have been in the situation and can understand things. But I also think that there's a role for mentorship, so that instead of just having moderators be these adults that are these paternalistic people, as kids get older and as they're trying to learn more independence, we need to let them hash things out a little bit more. And so, as I say this, I'm kind of thinking, one size definitely does not fit all. And, it also depends on whether you've got a goal of, we're going to teach kids to learn how to code. Then that's a real mission. And there's a lot of, there may be more need for more firm rules, because it's not the wild, wild west. Everybody is using Minecraft to be creative, but towards an end. And I guess the last thing I'd say about this for now is that I think one of the things about Minecraft that's a little counterintuitive that we need to sort of slow down and reflect on is that often kids come to Connected Camps or other things using Minecraft having had previous Minecraft experiences where the rules were different, where the culture was just different but unspoken. And so, although they're using the same play and they're, engaging in the same sort of activities, it's a different community and a different intent.
I think that's so important, Mike. I mean, and it's kind of sort of the broader mission that I have allies with folks like DIY.org and the Scratch community, that there's actually not that many of us who are designing open online experiences for younger kids that are intentionally designed to foster, intergenerational, pro-social development and creative, collaborative activity, because it is really hard. And there are a lot of disincentives and sort of concerns about having kids connect with each other on the open internet. So I think it's really critical for us to model like positive examples of, good intergenerational open communities, rather than thinking about the internet as being this scary place and kids shouldn't be connecting with adults. And I think one of the things that really we designed into this past summer that was different from our earlier pilot that Victor described was really to intentionally just create this multi-generational, this full stack, right? So we had the younger kids, and then we recruited high school students who were volunteer moderators and counselors, and then the college kids, of which Zach is one of our stars, who are right above the high school kids, and then we have our camp staff, and then people like me who are kind of hovering in the background when things really have to escalate. But that's where, I think it was pretty taxing to especially our high school counselors, and I know for our college counselors too, when there were really cases that taxed their own socio-emotional development in a lot of ways, because like Zach said, you're there, you're the grown-up at the table now, you have to model the positive behavior without exploding. And I think, was really interesting just working with our counselors every day and just having that conversation across ages and across different forms of experience where, as a parent and having raised two teenagers, I know less about Minecraft, but I know more about seeing young people grow up. And I learned so much from the counselors, and I think, we talk about our camp as being for the 9 to 14-year-olds, but I actually think some of the more profound development came with our teen counselors, actually. I don't know, Zach, if I'm overplaying this, but I'm curious how you felt working with, both the camp staff and the volunteer high school counselors as well.
It was actually a pretty neat experience because in addition to like the kids having their own like learning how to interact with adults on the internet, I learned how to interact with coworkers and stuff on the internet, and also expanding my social circle with my coworkers and stuff like that. And it was a neat experience also, just to like learn how different it is to communicate on the internet compared to in real life. And I also really enjoyed just working with other people too. So.
Yeah, it's a really great community, and I think you all are staying connected on Facebook and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
We have a couple questions from Twitter, which are kind of revolving around this question of, if you're an educator and you're wanting to get started with Minecraft or starting a Minecraft server, what are the costs? What are the resources that are out there in terms of code of conduct, technology, and so on? I don't know if any of you want to speak to that.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of resources that are out there. I mean, for me, I usually just look at, if you just want a simple server, it's like you could just go to minecraft.net and download the vanilla server that they have there, but it's like less configurable than like other modified servers like Bucket and CraftBucket and Spigot or Forge. Another resource that might be useful is also, I think Minecraft EDU also has a server setup that you can use, and they have some other resources there. There's also, I don't know, for me personally, I like going to like the Spigot forums, or even there's a lot of good resources on the admin craft subreddit on Reddit. So I would go look there, and not, I think also not being afraid to ask questions within those forums is pretty useful, because Minecraft is a great online community and people are willing to help you. So getting involved in those forums, whether it's the admin craft subreddit or even on spigotmc.org.
Mimi, can I speak to that quickly? One thing that I would encourage educators that are interested in getting into this, or counselors that are interested in getting into this for the social emotional learning piece, is to take some time to reflect on what your classroom style is, what your personal learning environment style is, and that is probably going to guide you as well towards some of the technology that Victor was just alluding to. That if you're someone that likes a classroom with very firm guidelines and expectations, then you're probably going to want more plugins to sort of police things and correct permissions. If you're someone that is much more interested in open-ended play and really open environments, you might have a very different sort of need for technology. So I think that's one thing I heard Victor saying earlier that is kind of a theme, which is that the technology is one piece, and the pedagogy, or your own kind of preferences for designing a learning environment and your own philosophy of how kids and how communities function best with you as the educator facilitator, I think those have to kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You can't just think about the technology, because they always don't match up.
Yeah, no, I think those are really great tips and pointers. I think some of the webinars later this month will be more focused on teachers, especially the last one, and so I encourage you to check that out if you're trying to bring Minecraft into the school specifically. And there's, like Victor said, the minecraft.edu site and server configuration is specifically designed for teachers, so that may be a good place to start if you're trying to bring Minecraft into a classroom context. There was a question from Tina about how if there's a way to have interaction within a closed school group, and I think it's also related to a question from Annie about how moderation happens. Like, does it happen face-to-face or does it happen online? And I think this goes to Mike's point about the fact that the context and the goals of your educational goals really are going to structure how you manage that. So in the case of Connected Camps, it's a very specific kind of environment because we have to do all our moderation almost completely online. We were working with educators who, in some contexts, were working with a group of kids locally, but we needed to be able to support kids who are connecting at home, and so we couldn't count on there being an adult on site that was reachable. We did have an escalation process where we would contact the parents and so on if something really critical happened, but I think it's a very different kind of setting when you are working and you can have those kids face-to-face, but it is challenging even for educators who are on the ground. Like, we're working with a great Minecraft educator, Sarah Caviar, right now up at 7 Hour School near us, and we're both moderating in-game and having her on site, because once you're on site and circulating with the kids, you're not necessarily in-game and watching what they're doing either. So it's a really actually interesting set of challenges on how you manage a purely online or what will necessarily be a hybrid environment if you're doing multiplayer in a local environment. So I think it's really critical. Like, I think the Minecraft.edu site has a lot of examples of teachers who have brought Minecraft into different environments. So looking for a setting that really models the kind of setting and the kind of objectives that you have for your program is really, really important, because like Mike said, it isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of proposition. On the Connected Camp side, we've been really focused on kind of removing that pain point of the online moderation piece and being able to have a more open, kind of accessible from anywhere, safe, moderated experience for kids, because that's something that most educators who are in a a time delimited kind of environment with kids aren't necessarily in the business of, providing that ongoing moderation and community support. So that's the piece we're trying to provide, but it's not always, that's not always what educators, if you're trying to do something more subject specific, that's not necessarily the kind of environment you want to support. So the good news is that there's a lot of innovation and examples out there. The challenge is that you really have to tailor the environment to fit your needs. I don't know, Mike, does that sound right, or do you have any other suggestions for teachers or the other environments you've looked at?
Yeah, no, I think that really is the key, that sort of self-reflection and I think that's something that educators are good at, with just a little bit of prompting, is just to sort of reflect, what are my goals and objectives? What am I trying to do? For example, the server that I'm launching is going to be focused on social emotional learning through play-oriented and cooperative sort of engagement. So I'm more likely to let more conflicts come up and have more things, opportunities for engagement. One of the things that's great about server technology is you've got a huge log, so that you could, if you are choosing to focus on conflict resolution, for example, you could go back over the log, and then at a time when you're not watching something in game, ping kids and say, well, I noticed that there was this exchange. Would the two of you like some time kind of trying to figure it out? So what you're hearing is an example of my Minecraft server that's a reflection of what I like doing, which is conflict resolution, thinking about things psychodynamically and therapeutically. That's not going to be what someone else wants to do. Someone else may want to be focusing on the content of learning a certain thing, of learning history by designing the Globe Theater. Then they don't want to deal with conflict resolution. So I guess the most important thing is, as you said, Mimi, and as Victor has also mentioned, is before you jump into specific technologies, really reflect about what is my mission? Like, what am I trying to accomplish?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Thanks, Mike. And I just want to take one more question. This is an extension of what Annie was asking about the moderation part. So what are some of the ways that you found useful to get a child to stop and discuss, dissect the situation? Any of you have any suggestions?
The cool down space definitely helped out a lot. And I would respond to how we actually moderate, how adult moderation happens. I would say it is face-to-face, but like with an asterisk, because even though it's not obviously like actual person face to face, like it's still from the player's point of view in first person. You see the avatar's face, like face to face, and at least for me, I try to keep my avatar close to my real face as possible. But like when you actually talk with them and reading in the chat, you can almost think of it as you're actually having a conversation with the person. So usually what I like to do when I moderate with children is that if they don't really understand what they're doing, it's just that I want them to understand how it feels for another person to, like, hey, how would you feel if you had your stuff destroyed? They would be pretty upset. And just trying to understand their point of view, and just going back to what Mike said earlier about understanding that even though we are very boxy figures walking around on a computer screen, somewhere over there across the internet, there's an actual person with actual feelings. And so we try to emulate that with our cooldown space by trying to have a face-to-face conversation with them, at least within the game. And it helps us get to them. And also, within the cooldown space, we actually have direct communication with them. They can't talk with anyone else. So they have a very dedicated channel so that we can be very clear with them and they don't get interrupted from what's happening outside or inside, or outside of the cooldown space. We have a special channel so that we can just communicate with them without having interruptions.
One thing I would sort of add here is that I think that this parallels what often happens in schools and other educational settings in terms of for teachers not to take on more responsibility than is necessary for them, that sometimes this needs to go to home, to parents, to caretakers. If someone is in a timeout setting in school, more often than not, then the school has often an obligation to contact the parents and say, we need some help figuring this out. By same token, if your moderators are finding that more time than not on the server is being spent with the kid in a sort of a set apart system, then that may mean that there needs to be more resources than just what either Connected Camps or the Minecraft server have to offer. You know, at a certain point, it's a learning environment, and family and parents need to be involved if it's something that is taking up way too much time and resources.
Yeah, your point is something that I think was a really important learning for us during the summer, is really trying to understand that balance between, you know, both how much should the moderators intervene and kind of grease the squeaky wheel kind of dynamic. When do we notify the parents? When do we back off and let the kids resolve on their own? And I think it's a really interesting dynamic that Zach was describing about internet interaction in particular. And, you know, that very first lesson of just, these are real people. You know, and I think that often kids can get into this mode where, you know, internet behavior is different from real life behavior, but like Zach was saying, it's like, first, just getting them to recognize that these are real people, these are like your friends in real life, you know, these are, you know, there's consequences that are about talking to your parents just like you would have in a regular summer camp. I mean, just getting to that point is often a real turning point for kids. But yeah, I think this is something that, you know, school educators and camp counselors certainly are familiar with. It's just there's a very unique twist because we don't have access to, at least in Connected Camps, to them in real life. And you know, I see some questions on the Twitter about, you know, can you have a closed school group? And I think that's actually, you know, for a lot of educators, probably the more typical scenario, that, you know, they are running a server or maybe even not doing multiplayer. In the case of a lot of the summer camps, their kids are modding or, you know, doing coding within a single player mode, so they're actually not doing social interaction online. And a lot of school servers are restricted to the kids that are known within that school community. So that's definitely one way and strategy to manage interactions, by keeping it to a known kid group. I think at Connected Camps, we're taking on the piece of the puzzle, which is that, you know, here we're trying to cultivate digital citizens who are going to have access to the open internet, and how can we, you know, provide that access in a way that has training wheels that develop the capacities for kids to have that freedom, the good judgment, you know, how you interact with others online. So it's just our learning goals are oriented towards that way. But you know, I see some of the educators on Twitter who are in coding and engineering, and again, those learning objectives are different. And even when we're running our coding camps, it's a different mode. Like, you know, the kids are, it's more skill-based, it's more structured, it's still, you know, the online, and, you know, there are issues of digital citizenship, but our server community and our kid club is much more oriented to the collaborative community, socio-emotional part of the equation. And, you know, that's a really kind of unique and interesting sort of environment for us to be learning in as educators as well. I see we're getting fairly close. Oh, I see Tina has a great comment, which is, as a science teacher teaching the engineering process, this seems like a great pairing of coding and engineering. And yeah, I think that's totally right. And I think next week's webinar, where, you know, we have somebody from the Chicago Architecture Foundation, we have Barry Joseph from the American Museum of Natural History, we have, you know, a teacher, Diane Main, from who does great project-based learning, and then also, you know, the coding session that is after that, and the final session, which is really highlighting teacher innovators who have really taken to Minecraft and adapted it for their subjects. You know, I think these are all going to be really great examples of different kinds of content, learning objectives, and so on, and how versatile Minecraft really is in addressing a really wide range of subjects and orientations and contexts. Since we're nearing the end of our session, maybe what we'll do is just give our three guests each an opportunity to really have a final word, and maybe, you know, I'll give a prompt, but feel free to riff on whatever you want as a closing comment about just What are some of the ways that we can foster healthy communities, positive socio-emotional development? Anything you've learned from your observations or your own efforts within Minecraft servers that you want to share with folks? I don't know, Victor, you want to start us off?
Oh, sure. Well, I know I'm supposedly the technology person here, but there are like several like intangibles outside of technology. One of them is like player engagement. Make sure you're engaged with the players within your community, and definitely learn from your community because just knowing what they like, and you could definitely build on that. And yeah, just have things for players to do within the community. So scheduling activities, um, communicating with your players like they're real people because they are. so um, so yeah, just thinking about that, and then after that you can think about the technology to after you learn from what your players want. Maybe you'll install this plugin because your players are interested in like building something that makes things that a plugin would make much easier. So those kind of things. So that's my little 2-minute spiel, I guess.
Yeah, we're really lucky at Connected Camps to have Victor, who really understands the technology but is serving the social goals of the club. So I think that's also a critical component of your ecosystem, is to have somebody who can translate the social vision into the technology, which is really, really critical because, like Victor said, he's not like it's not just about the tech, but you do have to be able to implement it too within the tech. And before we turn to Zach, I just wanted to sneak in one more question from Twitter, which is a tech question. Victor, not to pigeonhole you as the tech
Oh,
guy,
okay.
but what are the benefits and drawbacks of creating your own realm versus joining an existing server?
Well, I mean, basically, when you're creating your own server or realm, or you're basically building your own community. So you get to pick who's on there. If you have a whitelist or something like that, you get to pick the goals of what the server is about. Maybe your server is just pixel art or something like that. So it's online servers also have like different goals. So if you want to have your own goal within you have a vision of something that you want to do, maybe creating your own would be a good avenue.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. And, as somebody who, I'm not in the front lines, but I feel responsible for our community. Like, the one caveat is it is a real responsibility to be hosting your server because it's not just about throwing up a space. It's about
Yeah.
really building a culture and community. And I don't, I mean, I knew that going in, but, really being in it for the long haul, it feels like, wow, I've got my own little family here. So I'll turn it over to Zach because you're actually doing the hard work on the front lines here.
Well, it's wonderful to work with the kids, like I've said, and one of the things that I think is really great about having a digital environment is that you can replicate almost, at at least for me, during the summer camp, I was able to replicate, since I did work with children in an actual science camp before taking this position. Um, you're able to replicate a lot of things that a traditional camp does, whether or in some cases have a completely unique uh, take on traditional camp things. Like as for group activities, it's like neat to see when kids like form friendships when they're doing the building activities, and then after they're done with the activity, and they're like, one of the things that stood out to me a lot was when there was a kid who made friends with a bunch of other people in the server, and they made an apartment complex, and then they're like, we should make some for the mods. So then they built me a room, and then they're like, hey, here's a room, you can live here and stuff. And then I don't know, it was just really touching to see that the kids were like forming friendships not only with the mods but like with the other kids, and it's just fantastic to see that. And it's really exciting to see that kids are actually going to be able to if implemented correctly, that kids will be able to have these tools accessible to them with like the programming, teaching, being able to teach programming. Because I remember when I was little, you had to buy a whole robotics kit in order to learn the very, very basics of anything, but which was expensive, and I remember. But this is like way more accessible for more people, and it's really neat to see all the kinds of different kids that come over to the coding workshops to learn, and just to learn and how much they know already. Like, there was a kid at a workshop that knew about C++ and was asking me about, do we need to know C++ syntax when programming in Lua for Minecraft? And I said no, because that is way above the realms of what we taught. But it was really neat to see that kids are actually learning how to program in industry languages. It's really exciting for me just to see kids driving themselves to do that thanks to Minecraft and us being able to facilitate this learning experience.
Thanks, Zach, for sharing some of the more heartwarming stories from our camp. Mike, I'll let you have the last word here.
Oh, well, thanks. And you know, heartwarming is the right way to describe it. I think what Zach said sort of just, I guess, is one of the examples I wanted to leave people with, is that these are real relationships that are happening in Minecraft. People are really feeling heartwarming feelings, are really feeling like they're proud, really feeling like they want to belong. And so one thing is to just remember that there are real people and real feelings in whatever server environment you create. And then the last thing I would say is, while we don't want to overthink social emotional learning, I really think it's important that educators think of social emotional learning as sort of a pre-readiness skill to the other learning. That when people feel secure, when people feel valued, when people feel like they belong, when people feel engaged, they learn better. We have plenty of research that shows that. We don't even need to discuss that anymore. And that social emotional learning kind of helps set the stage for whatever other learning goals you want to build on it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a really great reminder of, just all of the different components that have to come into play when in order for kids to become effective learners. And it's a great transition to my closing sequence here, which is just to remind people that this is really the first of a 4-part series on Minecraft and connected learning. And like Mike said, the social and socio-emotional sides are an important component and in some ways a bedrock of the learning that we see through Minecraft, which is one of the reasons why we started with that for this series. We can continue the conversation through the hashtags connected learning and CCamps. We'll have a full video recording of this webinar available immediately on connectedlearning.tv with other curated content on the way. So, again, we'd love to stay engaged and keep the conversation going, and we hope you'll share it with your networks and also tune in to the upcoming webinars of the series. You can sign up for the email newsletter on connectedlearning.tv, and next week we'll have a conversation led by Randall Fujimoto on project-based learning in Minecraft, and you'll get a lot more pointers and insights about a variety of different communities that are mobilizing around education in Minecraft. And finally, I'll give a plug to Connected Camps. We are building an educator network that is context to get peer support from other educators, but also have access to things like, our guides and our curriculum and our code of conduct and professional development webinars. And we're really just trying to support educators and trying to bring Minecraft into diverse contexts. So we would love to connect with you all and keep growing this movement for Minecraft in education. So big thanks to our guests this evening and for the great job that you all did in launching this month's conversation.